This episode is brought to you by Unstoppable. Discover the inspiring true story about Anthony Robles, who defied every expectation to become a national wrestling champion in Unstoppable, a new original movie from Amazon MGM Studios and director William Goldenberg, evoking the excitement and camaraderie of classic sports dramas and thrilling wrestling matches. Unstoppable features an all-star ensemble cast, including Jarrell Jerome, Jennifer Lopez, Don Cheadle, Michael Pena, and Bobby Cannavale. Watch Unstoppable now, exclusively on Amazon Prime Video.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. It was quite a disappointing weekend in FPL for both of us, especially as we kind of talked ourselves out of getting Chris Wood last week. Ouch. But all is not lost as we're here to launch into our usual look ahead to blanks and doubles, chip season, and possible redemption. Yes, so here we are again for our chip strategy pod this year, and we can't wait to get into it, mostly because we've gotten past the team updates and have consigned that last game week to the past. And of course, I'm joined always by Sam. You all right, mate?
Yeah, not too bad. I'm a little bit coldy, so apologies if there's any coughing or anything on the stream today. I'll try and minimise it wherever possible. And I'm sure Tom will be able to tuck in and fill in the role whenever I do have a bit of a coughing fit. Should be okay for now, though. Obviously, FPL didn't go that well for either of us this weekend. Obviously, Chris Wood did the damage. I think if you asked either of us going into game week 22 that if we were to predict what Chris Wood would have scored, I reckon what he actually went and got is about par. So I'm not so bothered by his haul. I'm more bothered by the fact that everyone in my team just seemed to forget how to do any sort of FPL points, bar Trent. We'll come on to that in a minute, though. In other news, we are Who Got the Assist. On today's pod, team updates first. We won't dwell too long on them because who wants that, quite frankly. But today's pod is going to be all around chip strategy, which is a really good pod. We always love getting to this point in the season, and we've come across quite a lot of research. There's some great stuff out there in the community that we'll kind of bring ourselves back to throughout the pod. And we're going to focus it around 5 key points that we've come across and we've been thinking about to map out the challenges for the weeks to come. Most of the pod will be spent on that, but of course we will have a game week preview towards the end of the show, including Knee Jerk. Kluivert's emergence needs a bit of a mention, of course, and then on to best transfers in, best captains, bold claims, all of that juicy stuff. And of course, we'll have a look at our teams going into game week 23. It's Tuesday, the 21st of January. That's correct. All games are played. Sadly, no Ahmad hat-trick's going to save us post recording like it did last week. I really, really can't believe we didn't get that on recording, Tom. That was absolutely unbelievable. We had a good 5 minutes of just cheering after the recording finished in the studio, which was just incredible. But anyway, that feels like a long, long time ago now after this game week. Shall we have a look at the reviews?
Oh, I suppose we better, haven't we? So yeah, very quick and short. 35 this week. My entire week was basically Trent getting an assist and a clean sheet, Hall getting an assist and getting subbed off before Newcastle conceded their 3rd and 4th goals, and that was it. I got nothing else, just appearance. Salah obviously won the battle of who was the best captain out of him, Isaac and Palmer, I guess. Is that a positive? I don't know. And yeah, Chris Woods obviously did most of the damage. Should maybe in hindsight have done Jimenez to Wood, but hey, hindsight is always king, and it's always good to have more free transfers in the pocket, especially as we approach the first double game week of the season 24. And ultimately, I think we were really helped out by the 2 goals that the Saints scored. So thank you very much to your lad Sam. But yeah, very glad to leave this one behind incredibly quickly, but we'll return to the end of the pod to my moves this week with 3 free transfers burning a hole in my pocket, especially as I want to sling out Jackson from my team sharpish. If only the Nimwit had managed to hold his price overnight, that would have been nice. But no, had to swallow a price drop as there's so much more going on this week with Champions League and also the 3 p.m. deadline, meaning we're likely to have some modicum of team news perhaps, meaning that I'll probably be holding my transfers until Saturday lunchtime or until nearest deadline anyway. But yeah, want to forget this game week altogether. Went from 400k, all the gains I made last week, all lost, back down to 550k-ish. Same for you, wasn't it? 35 as well.
Yeah, mirrored story. All the progress I've made in the last few game weeks has been completely wiped out by this game week. Really unfortunate. I was fairly happy with my team on paper going into the deadline. Like you mentioned, Chris Wood did a lot of the damage, but I was kind of expecting around 12-ish points from him against Southampton. That wasn't a massive shock. It was more the fact that literally everyone else that I picked to go against him did nothing for me. So if I'd even gotten an extra return or two, this probably wouldn't look anywhere near as bad. As it is, obviously, 10 out of 11 same players as you. I won't dwell on all of them too much. The only difference being, I think, João Pedro instead of Jimenez. João Pedro himself got a goal ruled out. And at that point, I just thought that is absolutely typical. The only difference as well between me and you is that I did actually leave points on the bench. Semenyo, who I've owned for 15, 16 weeks now, every time he's returned, I've had him on my bench. And I can tell you right now, he hasn't always been sat on my bench either. It's not someone I'm using as my 8th attacker. It just so happens that every time he goes up against a, in inverted commas, stronger opposition, he seems to be one of the best players in the entire game. So maybe that's something I need to keep in mind moving forward. Meanwhile, Robinson, who'd kept 3 clean sheets all season, decided to keep a clean sheet, obviously, against Leicester. So I left those points on my bench, and they were 2 of only 4 returners in my entire 15. And of course, 35 points, down 170-ish K. Really, really frustrating. But I do now have 4 free transfers going into game week 23. Plenty to do with them. And of course, we'll start looking at Liverpool going into the deadline. Like you mentioned, that not early kickoff, but all the 3 p.m. kickoffs mean that Liverpool team news is very likely. They are the most likely team to get reliable team news from, it seems, over the last few seasons. And I could name 3 or 4 good sources that I'd back to get the team news correct. So I'm fairly likely to save my transfer until the last minute, knowing that that team news is likely to come late on maybe around lunchtime before the deadline.
Yeah, best to hold on, really, isn't it? All right, let's leave that behind and move on to this week's main topic, which is chip strategy chat. So yeah, this week I came up with what I thought was a super smart pod title. Can we be of assistance? Get it? No, which I think encapsulates what we're on about today, which is, of course, chip strategy. Now, we know there's a wide discussion going on out there, and it's definitely not in our wheelhouse to be delving into the detail of what fixtures go where, all the manifestations of that. The gold standards, obviously, James at Planet FPL, other sources are available. Instead, what we'll do is work through our view of the upcoming chip season with 5 key things we've picked out from our thinking around the situation. Sam, I'm reliably informed, I'm sure it is, has got a really great video lined up to go tomorrow on the assistant manager chip 2. So we're getting a sneak peek into his thinking on this as well. And through those 5 key points, we'll go through how we're maybe thinking of each chip being used, things like that. Just to say as well, apologies, but we really like to emphasize you need to do some of your own work. So we're not going to be doing things like saying, if you have X and Y chips left, do Z. That's not really on the agenda today. We'll certainly have a suggestion or 2, for example, on the next slide coming up. But that's not quite what we're here for. And indeed, there's so much sort of uncertainty still, as we'll learn in a minute, that it's not really worth us doing something like that quite yet anyway. Hopefully this is a useful contribution to your thinking. But without further ado, let's get into it. And here's our first point, which Sam's going to introduce for us.
Yeah, so point number 1 is inspired by a post I put out a couple of weeks ago. I think we're around game week 21, and I just clocked the fact that because of the assistant manager chip, we'd actually quite likely in a lot of cases have about 33% of the game weeks remaining, even at that point, having a chip active if you still had all of them remaining. Now, of course, quite a few of us have used triple captains. One of us is on the pod today, so it does differ from player to player, but a lot of us do have at least a fair few of the chips left, and all of us have at least 3 game weeks worth of chips left at the absolute bare minimum, that being the assistant manager. Most of us will have more than that. So we've crunched the numbers as of today. What percent of what percent of the remaining weeks, let me get my words out correctly there, will you have a chip active in? We've done it across a number of different scenarios. We've gone down to missing 2 or 3 chips. And then after that, you'll have to do your own maths and work out the different routes that you might want to take. But TLDR, if you have all of your chips remaining, it's 44% of the remaining game weeks you will have a chip active in, which is a very, very high percentage. It's much higher than we'd normally expect by this point in the season, thanks to the assistant manager chip, of course. But what it does mean is we're about to enter a really congested period of the season where planning is going to be essential, but also the swings in variance from week to week are going to be massive. And the potential for upside or potential downside could also be a really defining factor in our seasons for the next few weeks. So if you're ranked low, as I am right now, all hope is not lost. There is definitely still upside for the remaining game weeks. And of course, even if you're missing out on one or two of the key chips, triple captain being one of the more obvious ones that has been used by a lot of managers, that will still be plenty of opportunity left remaining in the last few game weeks. Couple of questions in the chat. What TLDR means? Too long, didn't read. It's more of a techie term, I guess. I don't know whether it's really gone into the FPL term, so sorry for that. But shall we have a view from Tom on what this all means?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good way to look over the upcoming schedule and give yourself a bit of copium, isn't it? It reassures FPL managers who feel like they're in the doldrums that there's a lot more to come. But it also means that if you are doing well, you have all the opportunities in the world to expand your lead. And, you know, I think that, as you say, it's a very unique year with the assistant manager. I think it's a really interesting chip. We'll come on to it in point 3. But it's a really interesting chip, and that it's one which is both insanely powerful, while at the same time being a chip that lots of us, I think, are hoping it's only a year in the FPL zeitgeist almost. But I think that kind of a headline stat of 44%, or if you've used one chip, it's 38% of the upcoming game weeks you're likely to have a chip active, is really important to just bear in mind going forward. Obviously, that gets a bit bigger after the next game week's out the way, and I suspect there are very few chips that are going to be in play. Even down to if you've missed a couple of chips, you've still got kind of 3 and 10 game weeks remaining that you'll be having a chip active. So there's so much to scope to recover effectively, or so much scope to heighten your lead. And I suppose everybody can take some kind of modicum of positivity from the situation that we find ourselves in. How locked in are the blanks and doubles, Sam? So the double in 24 is definitely lots. 29 blank is almost definitely. Yep.
Just on that, at time of recording, it's not completely locked. If Liverpool get anything tonight, it will be, and they are winning as far as I know anyway, 1-0 at half time.
Well,
so it will be locked by the end of the match.
Okay. The blank in 29 depends on how basically everything maps out. And then 33 doubles, 34 blank, and 37 doubles. There are going to be those double game weeks. It's just kind of the extent of the magnitude of those doubles, which I think is going to be key, and that depends on League Cup and also depends on the FA Cup. And you can obviously make all your predictions. If you go on FPL.team, you can see James Planet FPL's projected outcomes for the blanks and the doubles. But right now, barring an act of God, I think that those are the kind of the key sort of staging points for when those doubles and blanks will occur. I think that's right, isn't it?
Yeah, that's correct and perfectly summarized. And just before we move on a little bit in the discussion, obviously, I started talking about who's got what chips left. And what this graph shows is the percentage of game weeks remaining that you'll have a chip active in. I thought it'd be just quickly quite interesting to highlight for anyone losing hope what amount of chips have already been played. So as per live FPL, 27% of triple captains in the top 10k have been played. Overall, it's also 27%. So if you've still got that remaining, you've got a little bit of an edge there. The same goes for free hit and bench boosts. Bench boost is 17% in the top 10k, 15% overall. Free hit is 12% in the top 10k, 15% overall. And wildcard, even the second wildcard, is 8%. In fact, over 8% used in the top 10k as well. So chips have been played. If you've got quite a few of them left, you can still steal a march and you can still gain an edge over others.
So yeah, I suppose this is a good foreground for the discussion, really, in that it just means that there's going to be an exciting / planning heavy period ahead. But if you're an early FPL manager like us, that's manna from heaven, really. That's exactly what you want. And 2, there's loads of scope for hopium copium, however you want to put it, going forward. Just remember, if you have a chip active in around 35% of the remaining game weeks, whatever your situation, which is really, really important. Number two. So triple captain Salah is going to be extremely scary for non-triple captainers in double game week 24. So I'm pretty worried about this. Despite how good Bournemouth have been and how potentially resurgent Everton are, I suppose this harks back to our effective ownership discussion a couple of pods ago, because Salah's likely to be much more than 200%. I used an image of Haaland over 200%. I found the interwebs on YouTube, but it means basically if I captain, I'm like to have kind of, I don't know, 250, 260, so 50-60% Salah against me, despite the fact I've captained the guy. I suppose that kind of leads to a couple of things. One is that, is this the week that it fits in the triple captain, Sam? And two, is there any mileage in this idea that, it's too defensive and therefore a little bit boring to just use it then? As people were saying, I'm going to get it out of the way. But there's definitely maybe a bit of a pullback on triple captaining Salah that I've seen in some discussions, just because it seems a bit like, that's what everyone's doing. I don't want to be a sheep. What are your thoughts on it? You've got triple captain. I don't.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are 3 key opportunities to use the triple captain, those being the 3 double game weeks we've already mentioned. 24 is the most obvious in my mind to be using it. And the reason for that is there's more upside to be gained from bigger double game weeks with other chips. So assistant manager, there's more upside generally, which we'll come on to in a minute in point 3. So I would always want to prioritize assistant manager almost first in my planning, and then work back from that. And the least important double game week would probably then go to a triple captaincy, for instance. Bench boost, obviously, the more teams that are doubling, it's more helpful for a bench boost because you've got more of a chance of having 15 doublers or a wide variety of good doublers that game week. If there's only 2 teams doubling, which of course we've got in game week 24, it's impossible to have a full bench of doublers or any more than 6 double game weekers that week. So that lends itself more to a triple captain just through instinct. On whether or not it's boring, I don't really buy into that whatsoever personally. I don't really care whether something's boring or interesting in FPL. I care about whether it's getting me the most points. And again, the benefit of the triple captain is all about the difference between you captaining the guy and you triple captaining the guy. It's that little marginal gain. And honestly, if you can gain more than 10, 15 points from that, that's pretty decent. Now, of course, the effective ownership will be high. I'm not sure it will be as high as 250%, by the way. As I mentioned, 27% of the whole game have already played their triple captaincy, so it can't be higher than 273%. So it has to come down a little bit from that. And then that, if it was 273%, that's assuming everyone who has triple captaincy left plays it that game week. That won't happen. There will be people who want to use it on other other players throughout the rest of the season. There will be plenty of inactive teams as well. So again, that will lower the effective ownership a little bit. And there'll be people who just quite frankly don't like the opportunity to triple captain Mo Salah that game week. So it will be a bit lower. It might be about 250. You might be right there. I think it's more likely to be around 230, 220. And therefore the loss from going against Salah as a triple captain isn't going to be massive, I don't think. There was that one famous double game week. Was it Leeds and Norwich or something very similar where he was about 240, 250. I didn't triple captain him and he absolutely annihilated me. I don't think that that's what we'd expect this time round, mainly because the fixtures are much more difficult. Bournemouth are fantastic against the best sides, as we've seen. And Everton, like you said, resurgent is probably the right word for them. And it's a Merseyside derby. That does tend to be fairly tight, cagey games. So I'm not expecting loads and loads and loads of points. But in terms of the opportunities remaining on the table for triple captaining, it's the double game weeks and the other 2 double game weeks. If you've got bench boost and assistant manager, I do genuinely believe that there's more upside in playing those in those weeks, and you place them as higher importance than a triple captaincy, because the gain in terms of upside and also the players that you can gain on your bench in terms of mapping out the bench boost, there's much more to be done in game weeks 33 and 36 because we'll have more teams doubling, therefore more opportunity to take advantage there.
Perfect. So you're almost definitely locked into playing it then.
Yeah, barring an injury, I think, yeah, I'll probably do it. And it is a little bit getting it out of the way, to be fair, but only because if I don't get it out of the way, like I said, there's limited other opportunities to do so in double game weeks, and it kind of snookers me a little bit with my planning. So I'd almost have to use it on a single game week at some point. So I would still prefer a Salah who is almost a 90-minute man week on week on week. I'd back him to get 2, potentially even 3 returns, even in more difficult fixtures. And that adds up to being a pretty effective triple captaincy opportunity for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I guess it's like you'd have to then go for a single game week. They're playing Ipswich this week, or you've got a game week 28. They're playing your lot at home, but then I fell for your lot at home with Haaland, didn't I? Highest individual XG ever for Erling Haaland in that game. Not that I'm still bitter. But yeah, so I mean, this is why it's going to be quite a scary kind of situation. I know that maybe kind of 260 is going to be a bit too high, but you're still going to have a fairly appreciable amount of it's an anti-FPL, isn't it? A little bit. You'll be kind of rooting for your captain potentially to not do anything, which is never the best situation to be in. A defensive captain, effectively, you'll be kind of pushed into. Some people may have the minerals to go elsewhere. I personally won't. So that's it. If you don't have triple captain in 24, just to kind of quickly narrow in on 24, we'll talk about it more next week. There are a couple of contingencies. Number one, system manager. We'll talk about that in a minute. Lots of discussion out there on potentially using it on Arne's slot the first week that it's available. Just go in on the elite manager.
Or
and the
Moisey.
second one. Yeah, or Moisey indeed. Leicester at home is a good fixture, which leads me on to the second point, which is loading up on doublers. For example, probably talk about this next week. My plan, because I'm not using my triple captain because I don't have it, or not using AM because I've called on it, is to load up on doublers and have 6 and 24 to, I guess, maybe mitigate against the threat. So everyone's going to have one more player. I'll have an extra player because I don't think anyone else is going to get free Everton because no one's mad enough to do that. But I might. I'm not going for Calvert-Lewin. I'll say that right now. I've observed. It almost broke you, Sam. I'm not going there, but I will probably look at it and die and probably get Pickford in for Raya to go with Mikalenko. So that'll give me a couple of extra players really to just help me kind of, I suppose, mitigate the dual impact, hopefully, of triple captains and assistant managers. But Dan just said in the chat that he's expecting red arrow that game week. I kind of am as well, but it depends on how the rest of my team performs, I suppose. If there's like a runaway amazing performance by Salah, then it is good night. But if it's just if it's 2 or 3 returns, I think that is recoverable. So yeah, scary week, I think, for non-triple captainers. Go into it eyes wide open. But I suppose equally there's ways to get around it. And one of the principal ways, of course, is the assistant manager, which is, of course, the newest chip on the block, I suppose. So moving on to point 3, for assistant manager, it is sword versus shield as always, but this beautiful additional part to the assistant manager, which I think a lot of people have kind of breezed over a little bit, just because I understand it. People can't bother to really maybe engage with something new. It is a bit less easily intelligible immediately than the rest of the chip, so it's not quite Ronseal. You've got to kind of look into it a little bit. So I think there's maybe a bit of demystification needed around system manager to some extent. I know that probably the easy option is just stick it on slot, get it out of the way, that sort of sentiment. But on Twitter and on Blue Sky, there's a phenomenal fellow called Rob T, who follows the spread betting markets, and he also does a lot of other sort of analytics-y based work. And Sam, he's shown that there is another way really to potentially play the assistant manager, which could elicit far more points perhaps than sticking it on the elite manager like slot.
Yeah, so I've been a little bit obsessed with Rob T's assistant manager thread recently. It's very, very good. Do go check it out if you get the chance. This is one example, if you're watching the stream, of a graphic from that. Absolutely brilliant, but it's by no means the only example. And I'll maybe get a little bit too nerdy at times in this, what will end up being too long a speech. But basically, table bonus is massive. But it's not just about the fact that you get 10 extra points for the win or 5 extra points for the draw with the table bonus, but it's also towards the end of the season, the chances, the actual odds of achieving table bonus increase. The reason for that is because the way that the points have been distributed over the last 8 seasons, I believe he crunched the numbers on, the chances of you actually picking a team, and I'm assuming most of you by now kind of know a little bit about the assistant manager chip, but 5 places above you need to get the table bonus. If they pull off a win, then obviously you get 16, 6 plus the 10 for the table bonus, draw 8, 3 plus the 5. With that in mind, he went about basically trying to pick out where it was most likely to achieve those really big outcomes. Now, as you can see, if you're watching on the stream, the graphic suggests that all of the top 12 highest performing double game weeks included, but 1 game week performances have all been within double game weeks. So that's tick number 1. You want to make sure that you use your assistant manager chip probably during a double game week to give yourself the best opportunity for big points. That's fairly obvious. After that, all of the top 4 in terms of all-time assistant manager 1 game week wins have all been through table bonus in both of the double game week matches. So if you want maximum upside, what you want to go after is the table bonus matches as often as possible in the double game weeks. But it's not just any table bonus matches. And this is where it gets maybe a little bit too nerdy. The percentage chance of a victory is really important when you go in and pick your table bonus assistant manager. So towards the end of the season, obviously, as we know just through observation, we know that teams go on the beach, they have very little to play for if they're mid-table or so, and motivation drops. Whereas teams towards the bottom of the league quite often will have a lot to play for. They're scrapping around the relegation places. They're fighting for their lives. What that means is that the odds actually reflect an uptick in the percentage chances of teams being able to pull off those upsets, even if they're 5 or 6, 7 positions below in the league. And Rob T, there's another great graphic showing the table bonus matches that are 30% with the bookies or higher to get a win are by far the best opportunity for those really big wins on the assistant manager chip. So what I'll be going after probably towards the end of the season, because you've got increased odds of those types of fixtures occurring, you want to be going after 30% plus chances of a team that's 5 positions lower taking down a team that's a little bit higher up, but probably not too much to play for. Crystal Palace were a great example of that in seasons gone past. They got 41 points from 1 double game week. That is absolutely huge. And just to round off the point a little bit on the attack versus defense strategy, nothing wrong with going on the more defensive side and picking an Arna slot in game week 24 through to game week 25, then maybe swapping to someone else in game week 26 when they play Man City. Even if Arna Slot and the replacement manager in game week 26 won all of their games 3-0, you would expect 44 points from the assistant manager chip, which is not bad. That's obviously higher upside than a bench boost, higher upside than most free hits, higher upside than almost any triple captain I've ever heard of. So it's still great, but you'd have to guarantee clean sheets, a few goals and wins in every single one of those games to get near that kind of performance on the chip. So you're probably looking at something around 25 to 35 points for an assistant manager chip on a safe, steady Eddie pick. Obviously, Eddie Howe's included in that. But Arna Slot, Maresca, I think Arteta's in there, Pep's in there. Any of those, your upside is probably maxing out at 50, more likely to be around 35, 25 if you're unlucky. But if you go for the table bonus and you really go swinging for the fences on those 30% plus chances of victories and you nail a couple of them, you could look at maybe 2 scores of 30 plus and you could be looking at a 60, 70 point assistant manager chip. And as someone who's chasing, that's really appealing to me, knowing that I'll go into the last few game weeks of the season with this really, really powerful chip with huge upside to use in a way that benefits my team. Because I could be chasing by that point. I could also be defending at that point. If I want to go safe, then you take the 30-ish points from a slot or a pep or whatever, and you kind of just say, that's fine, I won't chance my arm. But if you're chasing, I love the chance of the upside. And that is why, in a nutshell, I'm using the assistant manager chip late on, because I can make a very well-informed decision on whether I need to attack, swing for the fences and go for the table bonus, or just play it a little bit more safe. End of speech. Really sorry. Thank you all for coming to my TED Talk.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And I think that interpretation of the data out there is one that I concur with, and from that, I think the assistant manager chip is probably I'm cooler, much cooler on slot for 24. I'm almost definitely not doing it. I think that was when the initial instinct was, hey, you know what, this is the get out of jail free card for people who have used triple captain earlier on in the season, but the obvious sort of feeling behind that should probably have dissipated a little bit based on the analysis that you've just presented, because the ceiling for slot, while appreciably decent, just won't be as good as what's on offer later on in the season. That's not to say it's guaranteed. I think you probably have more guarantee of going with an elite manager and getting those points in, which is probably where you have that sort of versus shield sort of maxim. But the rewards on offer aren't as big as later on in the season. So we're not nailed in yet. So not going to pick out any kind of particular runs. I think we'll do that later on in the year. But, you know, and I can see why, as I've said, some aren't interested in going with anything other than the Slate early slot pick. But just to read off a few fixtures that, as they stand, as eligible for table bonus, just to underline the sorts of games that actually, it's not the case that you'll be picking an Ipswich against an Arsenal or something like that. I'm sure that game's already gone. But, you know, games like Brentford versus Bournemouth, if you had Frank as your assistant manager, that couples as a table bonus, that qualifies table bonus. Man United again picking on Bournemouth versus Amorim, that qualifies table bonus, and Spurs versus the likes of Fulham, Brentford, and Bournemouth. Ange, those games all eminently winnable by the first team that I mentioned against the latter kind of opponents, all eligible for table bonus. So none of those games are together or anything, but it just shows, and we forget as FPL managers sometimes, we might look at the Premier League table as much as we perhaps should, how so many games coming up in teams might mentally place us nearby each other, or even assume that one team is lesser and one team is better. Sometimes the table actually tells us the opposite, and that gives us sort of advantages in terms of what teams are table bonus eligible, and which should be really interesting to us as FPL managers. To provide further context as well, we always see at the end of the season as motivation fades for some teams. You know, there's nothing to play for now in the league. Teams are safe; they're out of all cups. You know, players are thinking about where they're going to on their summer holidays. You know, contracts are running out, the paradigm can start to shift a bit. And we see teams motivated for all sorts of reasons: staying up, chasing the top four, less applicable for the table bonus, of course, racing to a European spot, more applicable perhaps, or indeed they've got a new manager in, like we saw with Glasner last year. All of these provide fantastic opportunities for the system manager chip. You can always take free bites of it, of course, with free transfers for managers across the board. So getting them one in each week to chain for table bonus. I mean, I think using it double game week is probably the right thing to do because you get the extra bite of the cherry. But I mean, if you do kind of identify 3 good fixtures that you think, right, okay, I back all of those as kind of the underdog winning, then, you know, be our guest, definitely do that. A lot of this will depend on what the table looks like down the line. And I was thinking when you were saying that, Sam, we may well be in a situation some weeks where we're hoping for certain results to fall a certain way to preserve the 5-place gap. You know, you won't want a certain team to win that week, even though you've got no dog in the fight otherwise, just so next week when you're looking to activate that AM chip, you know that you know there'll be that table bonus eligibility. I suppose on the other hand, as you said, you can just go over Pep towards the end of the season. It doesn't suit the moonshot idea, but there's good fixtures for City, for example, around the 33 and 37 doubles, depending on how things fall. And yeah, it all is dependent effectively on how doubles fall. It may be that you end up zeroing on 33 or 37, that is, that you zero in on one as being right. This makes a lot of sense for bench boost because of how teams are going to be set up, the key players who are going to be benchable, and those sort of edge pieces that I can stick on the bench and be quite happy with. Whereas the other one kind of then lends itself to system manager. So it's not quite clear yet where the system manager is going to sit. And yeah, I think just to underline the point, you're going to have to take the chance on this one, really. It could fail. There's no guarantees with going for this sort of moonshot strategy. It may well be that the bookies' odds are the bookies' odds for a reason. But you're kind of hoping, of course, that you have that sort of moment where, I suppose, motivation, reading the tea leaves means that you get the result that you want. One question for you, though, Sam. Is this moderated by rank to any extent for you, do you think? So you've kind of said a couple of times, oh yeah, well, I'm chasing, so this is probably what I want to do at the moment. If you were, say, I don't know, top 50k right now. Maybe let's put it at top 20k. And you've used triple captain. You anticipate that those people are going to be, triple captaining in double game week 24. Would you then maybe consider the assistant manager on slot more than we would otherwise where we are? Is it more attractive potentially to cover it in 24 than for us?
Probably more attractive. I guess the $1 million question is how you personally view that rank. If you're ranked 20, 15, 10k right now, you must be a little bit tempted to go for it, like really go for it and swing for the fences as well. So unless you're in a particular mini league where maybe you've got a big rivalry with a mate or something, and you're definitely looking at playing it a little bit more conservatively, that temptation to swing for the fences is going to be there. And I think personally, because I would love just like a top 10k finish as it stands right now, if by the time I came to using it, I was very close to that, then swinging for the fences would be maybe less likely, because I know that I'm more likely to get a 35, 40 pointer if I back Pep towards the end of the season, because he's got a great run of games, no table bonus, but you can still get clean sheets. You can still get plenty of goals. And as we saw just against Ipswich last week, they can slap a team for 6. So that itself could be not quite table bonus in terms of parallel, but not too far off. And you can still get a pretty decent high variance return. So I still don't mind that as an option later on. And if I'm higher in rank, which takes quite a lot from this point, then I will consider that more. You could even, as Martin, I believe, said in the chat, you can do a bit of a mixture where you attack tactically for 2 weeks because you like those fixtures in particular for table bonus. And then even if those don't go well, you could just switch across to a safer one just to lock in maybe a 10 pointer from a Pep or something. Or I guess there's no guarantees, but you hope for one and you're giving yourself a better chance. So you don't have to go all in on one strategy or the other. You can give yourself a little bit of a hedging in terms of the way you play the chip. But if you're massively chasing, then obviously that lends itself more to those big punts towards the end of the season. And if you're pretty happy with your rank and you're looking to hold, then you take the safety net of around 25 to 30 points or 35 points, and you're probably pretty happy with that, because it will be better on average, I would say, than your average return from a table bonus seeking manager. And those people who are chasing are literally just hoping that 1 or 2 of those weeks pays off and that they are able to kind of jump ahead of you. Obviously, they're almost playing the lottery at that point and the odds are against them, but it gives them the opportunity to do so. The same way that if I was chasing, I might triple captain a different player on the last game week of the season to try and catch a mini league rival. The leader's probably not going to take that risk.
Yeah, no, I do quite like that mix and match strategy. It makes a lot of sense to me, that's for sure. I think you could almost do something like, I don't know, target. I think City's got towards the end of the season, they've got Wolves and Southampton. I think that's before 36, which is the double. Yeah. But you could say, all right, I think that that game could be potentially really high scoring. You know, maybe I'll elicit see a 6-0 in that game, so I will get kind of appreciable amount of points from Pep. Then you move over to, I don't know, and I think Everton and 36 have got Fulham and Chelsea as their double. Maybe you're thinking, well, Moyes is going to do a job on those.
Table bonus on both. Yeah.
Get a couple of 0-0s or something like that. And then, hey, there you go with a decent number of points from that. And then you move over again to a good-looking fixture later on. So West Ham are at home to Nottingham Forest in 37, which again is almost definitely going to be table bonus eligible. So there's lots and lots of different ideas, lots of different ways to do it. And it all feels like trying to spot a fish in muddy water at the moment, basically. But I think that, you certainly seem to be quite happy by me kind of picking up Ange, for example, as an example of a manager who may be of great interest to us FPL assistant manager deploying managers.
Yeah,
a very difficult one to say. Any kind of tentative views from your research of where you might want to put it? Obviously, it's all subject to change, but has anything stuck out to you? Just Ange or anyone else?
Yeah, Ange is honestly the big one. He's got a decent little set of fixtures around 31 to 33 potentially, although I do ideally want to use it a bit later on, but there could be table bonus opportunities. I believe they play Nottingham Forest in 33, and depending, obviously, the way results go, there might be some other table bonus fixtures around there. The other one is Amorim as well, obviously languishing towards the bottom end of the league, but in a team that does have upside and can kind of pull off a bit of a giant killing every now and then. Obviously, we saw against City, we saw against Liverpool. They are capable of raising their game in those sorts of matches. So that might not be a bad one to have an eye on as well later on in the season. In terms of that last little period, it is so hard to tell at the moment who is going to be up for table bonus because just so many league places will shift by then. But someone like a Potter at West Ham could be a really interesting option around then. Obviously 0.5, not that budget in my view, really matters. The 1 million difference isn't going to be enough to put you off of going for the manager you want if you wanted to go for one of the more expensive ones. But Potter might have a good little set of fixtures towards the end of the end of the season that might have upside. Ipswich as well might be one that come into our thinking if they're still scrapping around that time. It is honestly too early to tell with those teams around that position in the league, because some of them will leapfrog a little bit. Some of them will just be dead and buried, like Southampton probably. Again, probably won't have too much motivation. So we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, there are definitely opportunities for the cheaper managers around that point of the season. If you want to go before that, Amorim and Postecoglou are probably your guys.
Yeah, certainly. Cool. Right, we'll definitely come back to this, I think, nearer the time, just because it's quite difficult to do anything right now, unless you're going straight away with slot, which is absolutely fair enough. I can understand the reasons why. It just doesn't seem to be enough for us. So on to point 4. Haaland could be the main reason, I suppose, why many opt for free hit 29 this season. So I think last year we both used free hit fairly aggressively, which was really, really helpful. But this year's, I don't know, it might be a bit different. So there's 2 blanks, 29 and 34. And the first one, it looks to be coming up in 29. And the huge price of Haaland, as we know, may be the thing that tips quite a lot of managers. I'm not saying it's necessarily going to be us, but quite a lot of managers into deploying the free hit in 29. So the reason for this, if you do kind of flick ahead on FPL.team or whatever planning software you use, squads at the moment are packed full of what I'd maybe call unsellable assets. So Liverpool and Newcastle are both projected to blank reasonably in 29. This may not happen, but if that did happen, the likes of Salah, Isaac, Hall, if you got him very early, so I got him at 4.4, and even Gordon, if you've owned him for a long time, become difficult to part with and hard to get back if you want to kind of find a route to Haaland for that week. Arsenal and Chelsea play each other as well, so maybe might not want Palmer. But again, I suspect you probably owned him for quite a long while and have a lot of money kind of locked up in him. There's good fixtures for a lot of how the template looks right now, at least, either side of the blank. And I suppose looking at the team that I'm going to get in Double Game Week 24, I'll find myself a free Liverpool. I already own free Newcastle, and everything else as a result. I get to a situation where I reach 29 with 6 absentees, of which 3 are kind of these unsellables, I'd say, in Hall, Isaac, and Salah. And also to get to Haaland for that Brighton at home game, which I suppose is kind of the main sort of captaincy bait for that week. I need to sell one of Palmer away at Arsenal or Salah due to his price. Also throw in probably wanting Foden as well, given how he's on the tear at the moment. And it starts to get super difficult to think about how you get to Haaland without using that free hit. Maybe that things will fall out where you can naturally manage this, but it definitely seems to me that there will be a lot of people who look at that and think, well, okay, I want Haaland for that week, I'm just going to hit my free hit. Annoyingly, though, I think it feels like we're going to have a free hit 29 versus free hit 34 split again in the community a little bit, because James for Planet projects 4 blanks in that week versus maybe more in 34. So there's potentially a counter narrative. And I suppose, as always, flexibility seems to be key. So you can maybe just model through, take a Foden. A friend of the pod, Martin, messaged me earlier, messaged me yesterday, said thinking about the surrounding context is key. And there's a couple of sort of manifestations. I was listening to James on the way home today. So that can mean this all kind of meaningless anyway. So the North London Carabao Cup final, which make this all meaningless, as easy to navigate, as we're likely to have 0 Spurs in our teams for 29, maybe 1 or 2 Arsenals, and 34. There could be a case, a very small case, a very small chance, I should say, that all games go ahead if all Premier League teams are knocked out of the FA Cup. So there's quite a few kind of things going on there. I do think, Sam, that we will see as we kind of see every year, the first sort of opportunity to free hit, people will kind of see a few big players aren't available in 29. If it does come to pass that Liverpool and Newcastle do blank, and just think, you know what, I'm just going to free hit this. So where's the advantage for us FPL managers? Are you looking at free hit 29?
I am right now, but I'm keeping my powder dry a little bit until we hear or see what those Carabao Cup semi-final results are. Obviously, you mentioned 4 blanks. By what you mean by that, I assume, is 4 teams blanking rather than 4 fixtures,
sorry.
right? Yeah, good. Okay, cool. So basically, it's either or in terms of, I think it's Arsenal-Chelsea could be a blank, but that looks unlikely right now. And then the other one is it Spurs-Palace or something like that? That could be a blank, but or no, Newcastle-Palace. I'll get them right in a minute. Yeah, that one. So yeah, it's either ors in terms of 4 fixtures that could, but only 2 of them will be. With that in mind, a lot of us do own a fair, healthy amount of Newcastle players, Arsenal players, even Chelsea players as well. Spurs, less so, but definitely Liverpool players with the double game week to come. So free hits will be on the menu for a lot of us. What I would say, though, is we're about to enter that period of the season where, as we mentioned at the start of the pod, game week 33 is a double, but then game week 34 is the blank. And there's absolutely no guarantee that the teams that are doubling in game week 33 are going to even play in game week 34. Those could be the same teams doubling and then blanking. So, or at least a fairly healthy overlap. So you might find yourself in a position where you either are not able to attack game week 33, or you've got a dead end into game week 34 or something similar, or free hit just to make sure that you don't have an awful team that week. So like you said correctly, James predicts more blanks that game week. That is likely to happen. Obviously, FA Cup results could pull off a bit of a shocker, but you would think that a lot of Premier League sides get to that stage of the tournament. So with that in mind, it comes down to whether or not you're more willing to use the free hit defensively in game week 29 or 34. And I think the real reason that we're mostly all looking to use it defensively this season is because of the addition of the assistant manager chip, which basically just means that even if you've already used something like a triple captaincy, you've still got to use a bench boost. You've still got to use your assistant manager. So unless you want to use one of those 2 for game week 24, there's actually no other double game weeks to even use the free hit in. And of course, if you've got all 3 of those chips, including the triple captaincy left, there's no opportunity to use the free hit in a double game week in a classical attacking fashion like some of us used last year. And it is the only chip that's capable of being used in a defensive way, that being covering off blank game weekers. What I would say finally on this is it's not the only way of defending. You can, of course, dead end, as I believe you came up with as a term quite a few years ago, Tom. And then the other way is this season, we've obviously got up to 5 free transfers. And I'm now viewing that is kind of a chip that you almost have to earn in your back pocket. And I've got to 4, you've got to 3. And if we can get to either game week 29 or game week 34 with at least 3 or 4 free transfers in our back pocket, that is going to be so powerful in enabling us to defend against the crowd, because it will be a fairly even split, I think, between free hit 29, 34. That amount of free transfers will at least guard us off a little bit against those managers who are able to fully cover that game week, and it minimizes the damage a little bit for us. But you can't use free hit as attacking this season, I don't think, generally, unless you are really able to use those free transfers to your advantage in both free hit in game week 29 and 34.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably about right. It's one of those where I think we need to just keep a watching brief on it almost. And it may be the case that, say you get to everything sort of falls, that you kind of think, well, I can kind of run through that, just because I don't know if all it will take is just 1 or 2 teams to kind of come back onto the table for one of those games, one of those kind of projected blanks, and you kind of think, well, all right, I can kind of deal with this. Whereas in another one, it may be that is the kind of the blank that lends itself quite nicely to free hit 34. Sorry, to free hitting. But as it's been mentioned a few times in the chat, it's obviously massively team dependent. And the beauty of this year of the free hits with the rolling free transfers and things like that, I like the phrase it's an earned chip. I think that's really elegant. But the beauty of this year, with things being well, on paper at least, different in terms of people having different situations, if not necessarily having particularly different teams at the moment, is that people will have to kind of deal with the situation in different ways. If you've invested in a team which is likely to blank, then hey ho, that's going to make things a little more difficult for you, and may mean that you free hit earlier and have to kind of just model through the other one. The only other kind of thing to quickly mention here is that some weeks, some seasons, you do have kind of this, especially when we're thinking about later on in the season with the 33 double and the 34 blank, you sometimes have these sort of golden ticket teams, I'm going to call them, who double and then play in the blank. In terms of the projections for this year, you've got Newcastle, which is fine. They've got Aston Villa away, and maybe Crystal Palace at home in the 33 projection, and then they've got Ipswich in 34, which is likely to go ahead. And the only other team which also does this is Crystal Palace, who have a less good double in 33 projected again. Bournemouth at home, Newcastle away, and Arsenal away in 34. Normally we have a few more of those teams, and it's one thing to keep in mind, keep an eye on going forward, that it may be that depending on results in the FA Cup, that some other teams may emerge who have that sort of golden ticket of having the double and also playing in the blank. And those are the teams you've got to be thinking about, particularly when you choose to deploy your wild card. But yeah, I think we'll know about 29 by kind of 28-ish, I think. And by game week 30, we'll have a pretty good idea of what 33 and 34 look like. So again, one to kind of come back to later on. But as always, I think flexibility remains key, which is our very last point really on this one, because there's quite a long way to go still, despite it still feeling really imminent. Small graphic on screen, which I'm not going to talk through, but it just shows we don't know exactly what falls into which place yet. It may be, as I've just mentioned, that actually you can cobble the way through 29 and do free hit 34. It may be that 33 looks better for assistant manager because 37 is a better double for the bench boost. I've got no idea when I'm playing a lot of my chips yet, and which may be, and I'm kind of waiting almost for a missing piece of the puzzle to fall into place. So, despite clearly I'd want Haaland in 29, and that being the biggest pro for potentially free hitting, then you may kind of recalibrate depending on how the fixtures fall and think, actually, I'm going to take the L that week on paper without Haaland because free hit suits my team or suits my plan a little bit better. So yeah, I think that kind of works. The only other thing actually we haven't mentioned here is wildcards. Have discussed it. Some have gone very early, of course, and I think that with the 5 free transfers this year, you can kind of do it. There was a bit of a movement in game week 21, game week 22. A friend of the pod, James FPL, has done this, for example, to wildcard early and have that sort of, quote unquote, on paper, perfect rollable squad that you can leave for 5 weeks and earn that kind of 5 free transfer sort of chip. Any thought given to when you're wildcarding, Sam? I mean, I do think this year, if you do kind of over the next few weeks, just think, hey, you know what, I'm at wildcard now. It's not actually that terrible, is it, to do?
Yeah, not at all. And honestly, that we'll talk a lot about chip strategy over the next few weeks and when is the ideal time to wildcard. And that's always kind of non-team dependent. We don't really bake in everyone's team on that. But you've always got to look at your own situation. And as annoying as that cliche is, it is all about your own team. If you're in a mess, it's way more important to use the wildcard chip when your team actively obviously needs it, rather than just wait until, in inverted commas, the optimal time that everyone else is using it, because you're going to lose so much ground in the meantime that it's just not going to be rescuable by the time you get to that point. So if you need it, by no means just hold on for the sake of it, just because some random people on a podcast are telling you, oh, there's an optimal time to do it in game week 30 or 31 or whatever. If you need it, absolutely play it. But what we'll probably try and do here is map out where we think that in an ideal scenario where we'd want to use it. What I'm currently thinking is I'm not going to lock it in at any given moment until I know what the game week 29 fixtures look like. We should know them fairly soon, basically as soon as we have that replay, the second leg of the Carabao Cup semi-finals. Once I know that Liverpool are either in or out, that is going to be a massive swing factor on when I free hit and when I wildcard. So if Liverpool actually do get knocked out, then all of a sudden free hit in game week 29 looks pretty unlikely. I might not even need it, and that might free up a few other strategies. But if Liverpool do get through and therefore blank in game week 29, then that might lend me down a strategy where I either dead end going into game week 29, and obviously transfer out Liverpool players, wildcard them back in, and therefore the wildcard would probably be game week 30 or maybe 31 if I can get away with it. Or if I free hit that week, I might be able to hold off on the wildcard for a few more weeks because, as you correctly mentioned, a lot of the teams that we think might blank in game week 29, if the fixtures fall the way we think they might, then they have good fixtures both sides of game week 29, and therefore you might not want to sell them at all. You might want to just free hit them out for 1 week, get in Haaland, get in Foden, get in all that good stuff, and then you might be able to put off a wildcard all the way through to maybe game week 33, even 34, or actually you could even push it all the way to game week 35 if you're really lucky, and dead end into 34, because obviously you've used your free hit already in 29. So there's plenty of different pathways you can use. Right now for me, it's likely to either be game week 30 if I dead end in game week 29, or somewhere around about game week 32-ish if I free hit that week.
Yeah, there's gonna be a lot of kind of calculations to be made about, especially if you dead end 29, like who you can take the value hit on. Would you sell Salah and then try to bring him back on free hit, on your wild card, and then try to make up the difference elsewhere? Maybe a budget enabler will come through, that will kind of make everything kind of look amazing. We simply aren't entirely sure on how a lot of these things are going to manifest themselves, but I do think there's obviously quite a lot, and we've kind of gone through it here, a lot to already kind of start to get stuck into, which is very helpful. I'm not entirely sure yet where I'm going to be playing anything. I don't have a triple captaincy chip, so I'm going to have to just kind of scrabble together some sort of defense in 24, and then as the fixtures land, Sam, as you say, that almost will dictate is that what I do. Yeah, flexibility remains key despite knowing the rough schedule. I think that kind of neatly nails home the point, really. So we're going almost an hour now. But yeah, the 5 key points are you have a chip active in around 35% of the remaining game weeks, depending on the situation. Salah triple captaincy 24 will be very scary for non-triple captainers. I'm going down to DFS again for I bought this week for Chris Wood, buy a brand new one, hide behind that. Yeah, for assistant manager, Sword versus Shield as always, but that table bonus eligibility is just huge potentially. Haaland could be where many opts for free hit 29 this season, and as usual, flexibility remains key. So that's it. Hopefully this kind of helps. Sorry, it's not prescriptive. If you're in situation X, do Y. But my hope is this helps you understand what's going on in the chip season and how it's all potentially going to meet out. Thanks, Sam, for a lot of the in-depth detail there, which I would not have been able to do myself. Yeah, really brilliant analysis. So, game week preview, shorter this week because of the amount of time we've allotted to the chip season. This carries in the knee-jerk best transfers, bold claims, and best captains for the week ahead. The knee-jerk, it's really worth talking about Mr. Justin Kluivert very quickly. Kluiverting our attention towards him when maybe we should be looking at the chip strategies and things like that. Another hat-trick for Kluivert this week from open play. Top bought player in. Very, very annoying as a Saro owner to see a similarly priced player banging, whereas mine has done sod all other than assist. I mean, X-Mins for Kluivert was always a risk, but he's kind of a beneficiary, isn't he, of the injury crisis at Bournemouth, and is, of course, emphatically on penalties. But I'm just wondering, Sam, we've used this section as a way to kind of just talk about the big topics a lot of the time in recent pods, but this time, maybe this is a classic knee-jerk. Maybe the jumping point actually is 25 when they've got Southampton, Wolves and Brighton. So, yeah, I mean, people flocking to Kluivert after doing lots of points. Is this a knee-jerk reaction?
Yeah, I think it is, to be put simply. Certainly this game week it is anyway. Yeah, like you said, in a couple of game weeks' time, their fixtures turn. He still looks like a great option. So I would happily be bringing him in that game week. But the next two just don't look great. As good as Bournemouth are, by the way, like they could easily score goals in that game, but I wouldn't be ripping up my side. And you've got Rodgers in a lot of cases who has 3 great fixtures in the next 3 game weeks. You've got Ahmad, who's been good recently, obviously got a hat-trick of his own only 1 game week ago. And you've got Semenyo as another fairly popular option, who I wouldn't say is any worse than Kluivert. Obviously, Right now, Cliver is also getting 90 minutes like Semenyo is, but as soon as they get a couple of players back, Cliver is the one that usually gets brought off a little bit early. So that will probably take him one peg down rather than it being Semenyo and Cliver fairly equal right now. Semenyo has the better open play data, but Cliver obviously has the penalties. And right now the X-Mins are pretty much bang on the same at 90 until they get some players back. By the time we get to game week 25, they might have some players back. So that might just bring Clivert down a little bit. He's still a decent option, great price point, and always having a penalty taker is great. But I don't think you need to be buying him this game week ahead of two pretty tricky fixtures and tough defenses to break down. He could prove me wrong quite easily. He's obviously just gone and scored a hat-trick against Newcastle, who are another good defense. But I just don't think it's a priority when we've got double game weeks to come. Free transfers are really precious with chip season and other doubles and blanks coming. I just don't know if bringing in a player with two tough fixtures in the next two is really a high priority for me personally. But maybe I'm missing something.
Yeah, maybe. I think maybe he and Bournemouth are ones that I'll come back to in 25. But right now, it doesn't feel quite the right time. But, if you do have IM 974, as you said in the chat, that, he's got Enzo to get rid of, sure. I mean, I can see why you go there. And as you said, Sam, they're very good against top teams. Got two top teams coming up, both at home. Hey, while he's in this sort of rich purple patch, why not go with it? Turn the page to transfers in this week very briefly. Yeah, so 300, almost over 300,000 transfers in for the spawn of Patrick. Chris Woods still being brought in. 200,000 managers have seen enough and decided that Chris Woods' time for their team is now. Right. 200,000 managers have now bought Trent. Cool. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. 150,000 have bought Foden, Sam. One that I think we'll breeze over due to time this week, but probably one that we both wish that we brought in for our Odegaard replacement, given how it's turned out over the last few weeks, or certainly over the last 3 weeks. And finally, Lewis Hall still being brought in. I know he was subbed off, but I think it's just he just had a bit of a bad game, and it was also a bit of fatigue, wasn't it? To be fair. On the other side, you've got Saliba being sold, 240,000 transfers out. Don't know. I haven't seen anything really. I think he's evolving well, is what Arteta said, but he'll miss Zagreb. That can mean anything. Nicholas Bloody Jackson, 200,000 transfers out. I really wish I'd sold that guy this week, but there you go. God, what a disappointment. It's posted on Blue Sky earlier that it really is the darkest time though when it comes to Jackson, with all those good fixtures, all that amazing underlying data, decent underlying data, and all these return for us, Sam, is 1 goal, 1 assist, and the price drop. We've spoken about him enough. I don't want to speak about him anymore. Palmer's being sold as well. Yeah, I know. Palmer's being sold actually. 150,000 transfers out for Palmer.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether. I think it's just people doing the straight kind of swap from Palmer to Foden, which. Yeah. Okay.
Do you reckon that's because he was flagged?
I don't know. It may have been, but
because they played late, so I reckon people started making the moves like lower down, started selling him just because he was flagged, and they thought, "Oh, I'll get rid of him." What do you reckon to that?
I don't know how the robots work, mate, but I'd be. At this point in the season, it would surprise me if there's that many people who are kind of still playing who think about it like that. But I stand to be corrected, because there are almost 150,000 transfers out for Palmer, 150,000 transfers in for Foden. I assume that those two are related, and maybe people are freeing up money to buy the likes of a Trent or something like that. Fair call. I mean, Chelsea have been. Well, I don't think it's a fair call, but I can see the logic behind it to some extent. Chelsea have been hit and miss, but Palmer has been producing, and they've got an easy game against Man City next. Another old club. Solanke with the mad out of nowhere 6 weeks layoff, 130,000 sales for him, and finally Raul Jimenez, who has been kind of very stop-start for me. I think it's his final game for me this week. 110 transfers out for the Fulham man. Right, bold claims, another wipeout for both of us.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't exactly the way the wipeout should have gone for me. I don't think I would have expected Gordon and Isak to score big, or at least get something, but that wasn't to be. Wissa and Mbermo did not outscore them, though, because they blanked as well. So that's a cross on the board for me. I've still got 2 for the season. Really need to improve my form here.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a dry spell, hasn't it, for both of us? Chris Wood, admittedly, I did kind of throw one away this week. Chris Wood blank versus Southampton, not
Bold for
even
a
close.
reason.
Yeah, but yours was close for all the wrong reasons, as you
Yeah.
said. Right, and next week,
Yeah, I'm going bold for a reason again. Two promoted sides to pick up points this week. Obviously, Southampton, Newcastle seems unlikely. Ipswich against Liverpool seems unlikely. Leicester, who are they against? Tottenham, is it?
Yep.
Yeah. So again, that might be one of them, and then I'm punting on one of the other two. Yeah, look, it's bold. This is a proper bold one. I don't expect it to pay off, but if it does, it hopefully is favouring my own side, and I can pick up some. Well, Saints can pick up some points, even if it comes to the detriment of my Newcastle triple up.
Yeah, got to beat that Derby record, Sam. By beat, I mean not take it. So yeah, fingers crossed. Turn the page to mine, which is likely to happen, I'd say. Nicholas Jackson scores a brace versus Man City, just because
Yeah,
this is
Brooklyn.
I hold him for all this time. Left Chris Wood, who has done untold amounts of damage to me, and yeah, it would not shock me one iota just the week that Nicholas Jackson decides to find the back of the net for once or twice. As a Nicholas Jackson brace versus Man City is my bold claim for this week. Cool. All right. Best captain. I think that it's anyone who watched Ipswich probably knows that it's going to be Mo this week. It's maybe Isaac versus Southampton's more daring manager is going to go for, but I think we've kind of got a couple weeks now of just Mo Salah and forget about it. Anything else to add?
Yeah, look, it's not the most obvious call of the season because Southampton have been really porous at the back, and Isak's been in great nick as well. But yeah, look, it's a home fixture against Ipswich for Salah. For me, it's just not worth really overthinking. Yes, I'm chasing, and maybe that could play on my mind a little bit. And Isak, you never know. Like, it's probably like a 75-25 that Isak usually gets outscored by Salah, but in some universes, Salah somehow doesn't come away with a 15-pointer and Isak does. So it could go the other way. But I think the odds are comfortably enough stacked in Salah's favour here that it's just not one that I'm willing to bet against. And yeah, it's Ipswich at home at the end of the day. They've just conceded 6. So it's going to be Salah.
Yeah. Nothing more to add. Okay, so our teams and plans for the week ahead.
Yeah, I think I'm first up on this one. Yes, I am. So I'll run through my team quickly for those who are listening. It's Raya in goal, double Arsenal defence with Gabriel, both away at Wolves. Obviously, extremely frustrating. No clean sheets in 4, but Wolves is a decent enough opportunity. I am looking at selling Raya probably next week to bring in Pickford for the double.
Yay!
Yeah, I know. And I'm hoping that he kind of pays off a little bit of faith that I've kept in him over the last few game weeks with a goodbye 6-pointer against Wolves. That would be great. In the rest of the defense, obviously, Gabriel, I think he probably stays for me. Again, frustrating, but the upside is undoubtedly there. And the Arsenal defense is not one that I want to completely move away from because the data is still good. And of course, he's got the goal threat. And Saliba's not going to be out for too long either. So their defense won't be awful. Alexander-Arnold, obviously at home to Ipswich, that's great. His ownership's just going to rise over the next 2 weeks. Hall against Southampton away, that completes my defense. In midfield, it's Salah captain, Palmer. No way I'm selling him, even though 150,000 managers have for some reason. Southampton away for Gordon is 2 of my 3. Newcastle, Isak obviously up top. Ahmad away at Fulham. Plays ahead of Nottingham Forest home for Semenyo. I'm tempted to switch it just because Semenyo just keeps putting in the points against the bigger, better defenses. So that could swap, but at the moment it's Ahmad. I was a little bit tempted to swap it across to Rodgers, but I think that's just forcing the move a little bit. I do like the Villa fixtures, though. Up top, it's Isak, Jackson, and Pedro. Isak's going nowhere. Jackson and Pedro are very much in my consideration for selling. I'm pretty likely, I think, to get rid of Jackson for Gakpo this week. I'm not completely set on him being the Liverpool player that I want to go for, but I'm about 80% of the way there. He didn't come on, I don't believe, tonight, and it looks like he's had his rest now. And Ipswich at home is a great fixture to be bringing him in for. After that, I think I'd probably slightly prefer the safety of a defender, but I'm happier with my defense, and I prefer to right a wrong in my side and also grab someone with decent upside in Gakpo over fixing a problem that doesn't really exist in my defense and going for someone like an Alisson or a Konate, especially with Konate managing his knee injury week on week at the moment. So that looks likely to happen this week. I could foresee a shoe and sell Pedro for Wissa as well, but I think I'm more likely to be getting rid of Pedro next week ahead of Wissa's fixtures turning with Brentford. Spurs at home seems like a great fixture for Brentford attackers. And I might not have Mbeumo by that point, but if I don't have Mbeumo, I think getting Wissa in seems like the next best thing, and his data's fantastic. So that might be a next week thing. Same goes for Mikalenko as well. That might be a next week thing that I'll think about close to the deadline ahead of game week 24. For this week, it's probably one free transfer, and it's probably going to be Gakpo last minute in for Jackson once we hear that early team news.
Yeah, for sure. I think I'd play Semenyo over Ahmad here and just count on Man United being rubbish. I know what Ahmad can do, but I mean, I just look at that, think about your track record with Semenyo, and just think, oh man,
he doesn't score when I start him though. So
yeah, maybe.
Not that means anything.
if you want the Forest fairy tale to continue, then maybe you should keep Semenyo on your bench and just I don't know. I think other than that, it was a pretty sound plan. I just probably doing Gakpo this week, but I'm doing Gakpo for Jackson as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's fine. I've got exactly the same defense as you. No surprises. Our defense has just ours being Arsenal has contracted Cityitis, I think, Sam. We're so solid. The numbers are great, but one, or in this weekend's case, two, is just fairly silly lapses equal a goal going in seemingly every time. I don't know what it is. Reminiscent of how City always were in the past, like so solid defensively, always kept the ball, of course, but there was always one chance that seemed to somehow dribble its way in. And we always spoke about Edison in the past being kind of a harsh binary of a 2 or a 6, and definitely feels that way with Raya at the moment. So I'll be moving him on to Pickford as part of my double game week strategy of 24. But for this week, Jackson out for Gakpo does allow me to do one thing, which is to upgrade Sarr to Bumo. Which I think I'm going to do. I'm at 0.0 now because of Jackson's price drop. So I'll be keeping an eye on that over the course of the week. I may have to go early on Gakpo if Jackson's likely to drop again. I suspect he might be close on Friday night, so I may have to kind of bite the bullet on that. If it does turn out that Gakpo's not playing for whatever reason, I do have Ahmad on the bench, so I'm more than happy to just kind of switch that around and hope for the best. If there's an injury, of course, that'd be really annoying. But with free transfers, I think I'd do those two moves. Sarr and Bumo obviously play each other, but I think I want Bumo for the ensuing fixture run anyway, so I might as well get him in. As obviously he's not the basement price, but the lowest price I'm probably going to get him in before lots of interest does start to stir in him once more. Get him in, get it sorted, and have that midfield of Gordon, Palmer, Salah and Bumo does sound pretty good to me. Playing Raul this week over Ahmad, just favouring the pen taker, basically. It's the same defence as you. Gordon, Palmer, Salah and Bumo would be the dream midfield. Isaac, Gakpo and then Raul. I think that does sound to me pretty good. 2 free transfers, 1 free transfer to roll over next week, when I will buy a couple of Everton players and probably hate my life. This week it feels very, very nailed on for me.
Yeah.
And Salah with the armband, but that looks good. I'm going to be, ideally waiting until Saturday lunchtime like you, but I may have to go a bit earlier just because of how tight the transfers are effectively. So if there is a rise or a fall, I might have to go early, but I think it should be all right. I think that they're quite good upgrades. Paul just said exactly the same in the chat, which makes me feel amazing. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, I completely agree with Paul as well. I think that is just such an obvious upgrade in both positions. I absolutely love it. So I would have no hesitation in going early if you need to because of prices. Obviously, if you can wait, great. But I think it's just such an obvious upgrade. I love that. I love that double swap. If I could do that myself, I would undoubtedly do it too. So yeah, fair play, mate. I'm massively behind that. So yeah, I also am very jealous of you getting Mbeumo back in a week early, and that looks like the perfect midfield to me. So yeah, fantastic. And fingers crossed that's a green arrow for you.
Yeah, I can't wait to see how that spectacularly manages to fail. Chris Wood scoring 4 goals or something ridiculous. Anyway, we've managed to go through the entire chip strategy and do the game week preview in under an hour and 20 minutes, which is obviously a bit of a feather on our cap.
Yeah, efficient. Very good. It must be because there's no Premier League action going on in the background to get distracted by. But hopefully you've all really enjoyed that. We have, as always, been Who Got the Assist. We are on Blue Sky at WGTA, or FPL Pricey for myself, on Twitter or X, no matter what you want to call it, at WGTA_FPL. And again, FPL Pricey on there for me. Instagram and Threads is WGTA.FPL, and FPL Pricey again for me. If you did enjoy the pod, we'd really appreciate it if you could go and follow us on those channels. Keep an eye out, by the way, as well for my assistant manager video tomorrow on my YouTube channel, FPL Pricey on there too. Just thought I'd drop that one in quickly. Give the pod a 5-star rating on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you're listening. And of course, if you're watching on YouTube, if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, that would be greatly appreciated and really, really helpful for both of us. All of those things do really mean quite a lot to us. So thank you very much in advance.
Yes, indeed. Thanks for listening and watching. We'll be back next Tuesday to follow on from this pod and warm up for the first double game week of the season. In the meantime, we hope we assist you think about chip season, and we'll see you next Tuesday.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.